Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to Bhagavad Gita Satsang. I'm so happy to see you all here. I'm very honored to have you all here and very pleased to be able to be here with you. I trust that I can be heard, but not enough just to go on speaking without some confirmation that that is in fact the case. So thank you very much, Jill, for raising your hand. I assume you all know where to find the raise your hand button, and that way you can let me know that you can hear me. Okay, Sue, thank you very much. Nia, Perry, thank you all very much. I will lower all of your hands and proceed with our usual little bit of housekeeping for those of you who are new to our satsang. You can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or your video camera because you can see and hear me, but I cannot see or hear you. However, if you would like to be heard, you can type into the Q&A or into the chat box as you wish. I have them both up on my screen and I will keep an eye on both of them. So thank you all very much once again for being here. Our last class, chapter 11, verses 35 through 42, the role of prayer in yoga as Arjuna began offering prayers to the universal form, the divine revelation that he was given spiritual vision with which to see. We spoke about what Arjuna was really afraid of as he was described himself as being fearful. And we're going to pick up right there where we left off at Arjuna's request for forgiveness for his familiarity and any offenses that he might have committed in the course of being overly familiar with his good friend, who it turns out is the Supreme Godhead. So Arjuna will conclude his prayers in this evening's class. He will make a request of the vision he sees of the universal form. Speaking to Krishna in that form, he will ask Krishna to reveal or show instead his four-armed form as Vishnu. And we will speak a little bit about Krishna's internal potency and the role that plays in Krishna's relationship with everyone. We will begin with our invocation mantra. So for those who are not familiar with the Sanskrit diacritical marks that give us cues for the proper pronunciation of this mantra, the dot over the M indicates that we close the back of our tongue up against the back of the roof of our mouths, while at the same time bringing our lips together in front. The bar across a vowel, in this case an A, indicates an elongated and open version of the sound, in this case ah, as opposed to a shorter version So I will chant our invocation mantra. You may chant back if you like. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. So particularly appropriate this evening, as this is both a Vishnu mantra and a Krishna mantra, the all-pervading transcendence, indicating Vishnu, and the son of Vasudeva, indicating Krishna. So last week we left off with two verses rather, 41 and 42 together, which I have a snippet of on the screen. Arjuna, in his prayers to Krishna, says, "Thinking of you as my friend, I have rashly addressed you, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, not knowing your glories. Please forgive whatever I may have done in madness or in love. In jest, I have dishonored you as we relaxed, lay on the same bed, or sat or ate together, sometimes alone and sometimes in front of many friends. O infallible one, please excuse me for all those offenses." So this portion of Arjuna's prayer, as we discussed, is about repentance, about feeling, in his case, bad about being so familiar with someone who it turns out to be is the supreme Godhead. And this is what Arjuna was actually afraid of. He wasn't so much afraid of death or afraid of the vision of the universal form. Yes, afraid, but that wasn't his real concern. So he is going to finish up this same line of thinking in the next couple of verses. And then Krishna will speak. So I will read the translations. And then we'll go back, as is our usual program, and look at each one of these verses in some detail. So beginning with chapter 11, verse 43, Arjuna continues. "You are the father of this complete cosmic manifestation, of the moving and the non-moving. You are also the most glorious and worshipable spiritual master. How is it possible for anyone within the three worlds to be equal to or greater than you, O Lord of immeasurable power? You are the Supreme Lord, to be worshipped by every living being. Thus I fall down to offer you my respectful obeisances and ask your mercy. As a father tolerates the impudence of his son, a friend the impertinence of a friend, or a lover the familiarity of his beloved, please tolerate the wrongs I may have done you. After seeing this universal form, which I have never seen before, I am gladdened, but at the same time my mind is disturbed with fear. Please, therefore, bestow your grace upon me and reveal again your form as the personality of Godhead, O Lord of Lords, O abode of the universe." That was 45, and then 46. "O universal form, O thousand-armed Lord, I wish to see you in your four-armed form, with crown and carrying a club, a wheel, conch, and a lotus flower in your hands. I long to see you in that form." Verse 47. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, happily have I shown you by my internal potency this supreme universal form within the material world. No one before you has ever seen this primal form, unlimited and full of glaring effulgence." Verse 48. "O best of the Kuru warriors, no one before you has ever seen this universal form of mine, for neither by studying the Vedas, nor by performing sacrifices, nor by charity, nor by pious activities, nor by severe penances can I be seen in this form in the material world." Verse 49. "You have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form that you desire." So even Krishna himself acknowledges that his universal form, the form of time, the destroyer of everything, is indeed a horrible, ghastly form, pointing to the idea of completeness in the Supreme Being. That is to say, encompassing both light and darkness, as opposed to thinking about darkness or horror as somehow or other separate from the Supreme Being. In this way of thinking about the Supreme Being, it is not possible for anything to truly be completely separated, even though he speaks earlier in the Gita about the material energy as his inferior separated energy. Still, there is a certain unity, a certain oneness with the energy, while at the same time there is a distinction between the spiritual energy and the material energy. So a bit of a paradox. Let's go back now and look at verse 43. Once again, the verse reads, this is now Arjuna speaking, "You are the father of this complete cosmic manifestation, of the moving and the non-moving. You are also the most glorious and worshipable spiritual master. How is it possible for anyone within the three worlds to be equal to or greater than you, O Lord of immeasurable power?" So, looking at this line by line, we start with the idea that the Supreme Person is the source of every other person, the origin of everyone and everything. This is also confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with the proposition, "Now, try to understand Brahman," defined as that from which or from whom birth, death, etc., all things proceed. So Krishna has established himself as the personal form of the absolute truth from whom all things proceed. Therefore, it is natural that all that has proceeded from this one Supreme Being ought to pay homage to the source of their being. At least in Arjuna's mind, that makes sense. Arjuna also says, "You are also the most glorious and worshipable spiritual master." So in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, one of the descriptions of Ishvara, the Supreme Person, the Purushottama, or the Purusha Vishesha, the one person who is categorically different from all other persons, is the teacher of the ancients, or the original seed of omniscience, of complete knowing, and the teacher of knowledge, the original teacher to the most ancient of the ancients. Therefore, as the original source of all that is knowable and the ultimate object of knowledge at the same time, naturally, Arjuna concludes that Krishna is the most glorious and worshipable of all gurus, of all spiritual teachers. How is it possible for anyone within the three worlds to be equal to or greater than you? Another way to think about this is, how can anyone be one with the Supreme Person? Having demonstrated such extraordinary power and the unique ability to display that power, Arjuna considers that Krishna is uniquely qualified to occupy this position. It's not as if anyone else could possibly be the Supreme Being that has displayed this extraordinary power to Arjuna. There's also the idea of the Supreme Person as greater than the sum of all the parts. That is to say, the Supreme Being, the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth is reality itself, and yet is greater than the sum of all the parts of reality that make it up. So taking a little something from Ramanuja's commentary on this verse, Ramanuja says, as nothing is equal to him individually or collectively in any respect, then it is not possible for anything in all of existence to be superior to Lord Krishna in any way. Which is to say that even if you were to take the sum total of all being that makes up the absolute reality, still the personality of Godhead, that person from whom Godness emanates, would still somehow or other be greater. So another kind of mind-blowing paradox. So if you have any questions about any of this so far, go ahead and pop it in the Q&A box, or if you like, you can use the chat box, either one. Meanwhile, the next verse is one that we are going to chant together. This will be verse 44. So coming back to our diacritical marks, the bar over the vowel, I've already explained. A dot under an N or other similar vowels indicates that you're going to pronounce the letter all the way in the back of your mouth. So instead of an N sound in the case of the second word of the first line where you put your tongue right behind your teeth, you're going to put the back of your tongue up against the back of the roof of your mouth. The dot over an M, we explained earlier. The accent mark over an S is a deep SH sound from the back of your mouth, as opposed to a regular SH sound, sh, a little higher pitched, and that would be indicated by a dot under an S. A dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, indicates that a short version of the vowel that precedes that H will be echoed back. That's only going to be true when that occurs at the end of a line. The dot under the D also, similarly, instead of a D behind your teeth, it's going to be a D further back on the roof of your mouth. So there you go. I will chant each line and give you a moment to chant the line back. Here we go. Tasmat pranamya pranidhaya kayam. Again. Tasmat pranamya pranidhaya kayam. Prasadaye tvam maham isham idhyam. Same line. Prasadaye tvam maham isham idhyam. I just realized something. Hang with me for just a moment here. Let's see. Where would this be? Ignore all. Let's see if it gets them all. Nope, one word at a time. All right. So my apologies. I realized that with the spell check on, some of these diacritical marks are not actually visible underneath. And therefore you may be wondering, what is he talking about? So I'm going to take just a second to ignore all the misspellings. And now I will remember for next time And that will assure you that you will actually be able to see the diacritical marks and know that we are not chanting about sodium. There we go. All right, hopefully that will make it easier for everyone. All right, let's take it from the top, one line at a time. Here we go. Tasmat pranamya prangidhaya kayam prasadaye tvam aham isham idhyam Ditteva putrasya sakheva sakyuhu Priya priyayarhasi deva sudham Translation once again. You are the Supreme Lord to be worshipped by every living being. Thus I fall down to offer you my respectful obeisances and ask your mercy. As a father tolerates the impudence of his son, friend the impertinence of a friend or a lover, the familiarity of the beloved, please tolerate the wrongs that I have done to you. So a few of the words that are used here in the Sanskrit. In the first line, pranamya, offering respects, pranam. Pranidhaya means laying down, and kayam means body. So laying down, falling flat like a stick on the ground, while prasadaye, the first word of the next line, which means to beg for mercy, to ask for a benediction, particularly to ask for kindness from someone. So here we see an interesting juxtaposition. Arjuna was before talking about how in the past they just hung out, they would sit on the same bed, they would eat lunch together. Arjuna would treat Krishna as if the two of them were on the same level, which Krishna actually was fine with because he likes having friends. Everyone likes having friends. Where does that come from? It comes from wherever everything else comes from. It originates in the Supreme Person. However, Arjuna now, having become painfully aware of the actual position of his friend whom he hangs out with, has changed his whole expression of how he relates to Krishna by bowing down, lying down flat on the ground while he is offering these prayers with folded hands. And he gives an interesting way of talking about or making a comparison to different life stages and different relationships in different life stages when he speaks about asking for forgiveness for his familiarity, beginning with, as a father tolerates the impudence of a son. So in the beginning of one's life, the important relationship is with one's parents. And there is respect, but there's also familiarity. And so that's the first relationship that we have when we come into the world. Our primary relationship is with our parents. As we get older, the relationship we have with our parents starts to fade away in favor of relationships with friends. And therefore, Arjuna gives this example from this next stage of one's life. And as one gets older still, one focuses on one person who is their beloved, their intimate partner. And now that becomes the primary relationship of one's life. So Arjuna has given an example of at all three of these stages. Basically, he's covering all bases of possibilities of ways that Krishna can think about how this is familiarity, born of a relationship of love, and therefore should be forgivable, given that these violations of protocol, shall we say, with regard to the living entity and the worshipable supreme person is concerned. And as we will see, Krishna is perfectly happy to overlook these apparent transgressions that Arjuna is so concerned about. Next verse, verse 45, Arjuna continues, after seeing this universal form, which I have never seen before, I am gladdened, but at the same time, my mind is disturbed with fear. Please, therefore, bestow your grace upon me and reveal again your form as the personality of Godhead, O Lord of Lords, or O abode of the universe. So this is really interesting insofar as Arjuna understands that what he's seeing is the power of God, not the person who occupies the position and has the power. He's seeing the power manifest. And it's the power, not the person, that's filling him with fear, and also blowing his mind. So his feelings are conflicted. And that's not unusual. Feelings are messy. Relationships are messy. So at the same time, he feels both overjoyed and agitated, thrilled and yet disturbed. He's in awe of the power of his friend, but he isn't really as interested in the power as he is in the person who is powerful. And therefore, he wants to see Krishna in his form as the personality of Godhead, rather than in his form of the power of Godhead. So, something worth considering about what Arjuna is seeing is that this universal form Krishna has revealed to him is a material form, and therefore is a temporary form, just as the material world itself is temporary. This is the form of time, and while time is an eternal energy, the material world, wherein time does its thing, is sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest, unlike the personality of Godhead, who is eternally manifest in the spiritual realm and eternally present everywhere all the time. So in this spiritual realm that never goes away, you may recall earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of his own abode, where there's no need of electricity or any kind of artificial light. Everything is naturally effulgent. And how that abode of his own personal place, remains even after this material world has disappeared. So within that realm, Krishna has eternal forms. He has his form as Krishna, but he also, because he is unlimited, has unlimited spiritual forms. in a particular look that the Vedic literature describes is the look of someone who actually has 4 arms rather than just 2. Also kind of an interesting idea. A little something from Madhva's commentary before we take a closer look at the whole 4-armed form of Vishnu thing. Madhva comments that the sense here is that the original form of the Supreme Lord is superior to the temporary form of time and the material world, the universal form, and therefore should be meditated upon as all other expansions and forms emanate from him. So it is from Krishna's own personal form that this universal form becomes manifest. It's not the other way around. It's not that the power gives rise to the powerful, but rather the powerful displays the power. So a good distinction to make here, which takes us to, unless we have some questions about that, our next verse. And once again, I'm going to take just a minute to do something I will certainly remember to do beforehand next time. And that is get rid of or ignore what PowerPoint seems to think are misspellings. I'm not really sure how I can teach PowerPoint transliterated Sanskrit, but I will certainly look that up and do my best to do so. Also doesn't like to, there we go. All right, compound words. I hope that didn't take too long for you. Here we go. I will chant each line, and now that you can clearly see the diacritical marks, and I don't think, there are a few other things I want to point out for you. The C in transliterated Sanskrit is always a CH sound, and when you see 2 C's together, you pronounce them both, as in the first word of the second line. And when an H follows a C, which is a CH sound, you put some extra H-ness after it, so a little extra air. That is the only new and different thing I see here. So I will chant each line. You can chant each line back. Kiritinam gadhinam chakrahastam Ichchami tvam drashtumaham tathaiva. Tenaiva rupena chaturbhujena. Sahasrabaho bhava vishvamurte. Some of you yoga enthusiasts may recognize in the third line, at the end of the third line, the word chatur, as in chaturanga, which translates as 4-limbed staff pose. So here, rupena chaturbhujena indicates the form with 4 arms. Translation once again. O universal form, O 1,000-armed Lord, I wish to see you in your 4-armed form, with crown and carrying a club, a wheel, a conch, and lotus flower in your hands. I long to see you in that form. So in that form, well, let's take a look at that form, actually. So here we go. This is actually one of my favorite paintings of Lord Vishnu. You see above him the thousand-headed serpent, Ananta, always providing a place of rest and shelter for Lord Vishnu. And you can see that Vishnu here has 4 arms and is carrying an object in each of his hands, as indicated by Arjuna. In the order he puts it, a club, wheel, conch, and lotus flower. What we're going to do is we're going to look at each one of these objects and explore their significance a bit. But first, up to this point, Arjuna is not seeing Krishna anymore. What he's seeing is the universal form, and that's who or what he is speaking to. He knows that this is Krishna's power being manifest. So Krishna is in there somewhere. But the illustration that you have seen with Arjuna on the chariot and Krishna kind of like saying, here you go, here's what it is a little misleading, representational as it is, in that Krishna himself has disappeared from Arjuna's view, and Arjuna is really just seeing the universal form. So Arjuna knows that Krishna is the source of this form, and now he is asking to see the form of Vishnu, which is the spiritual form, as opposed to the material form, the form of the personality in spirit. That is to say, a form, a body made of pure spirit or consciousness, as opposed to the temporary material form that he has been seeing in the universal form. So let's look at each of the objects that Vishnu is holding in his hands. We'll go from left to right. So beginning with the conch shell and the lotus, these are 2 spiritual symbols of creation and eternity. Creation, of course, means something comes into being. So you could say that this is the source of the conch shell, indicates the source of creative energy, symbolizes the sacred sound Om when you blow into a conch shell, which is normally done in a more formal ritual of deity worship, say in a Hindu temple or in a Vishnu temple. So the conch represents the sound Om, which itself is said to emanate from the breath of Vishnu, and that the sound Om pervades all of space. The conch shell, in addition, has a form made of multiple spirals that evolve from one point to ever increasing spheres. So it is also a representation of eternity, since it can go on forever. So the source of time residing in eternity. So that's how we can think about the conch shell. Technically, the Sanskrit word for the conch is shankha. The Sanskrit word for the lotus is padma, and that also is a symbol of creation insofar as the lotus flower, the original lotus flower of the universe, grows out of the navel of Lord Vishnu, and he lies down on the water, and Brahma appears in that lotus, Brahma being the first created being in the universe and the engineer of the universe. So Vishnu, another name for Vishnu is Padmanabha, or the one with the lotus flower in his navel. The lotus also expresses purity, the internal feminine force, which is the creative force, the force of bringing together and also separating. And it also signifies Lord Vishnu's transcendental position, because even though the lotus flower grows in muddy waters, you never see either water or mud sticking to a lotus flower. It always remains transcendental to its surroundings. So similarly, one who understands the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities, it does not have to come back to this material world, but attains Krishna's own abode as described earlier. Krishna makes this statement and assurance earlier in the Bhagavad Gita. The next two objects are symbols, are weapons actually, are symbols of destruction in time. So the disc or the wheel is called the Sudarshan Chakra, the wheel of time. It's a weapon that's used to cut off the heads of those who are demonic. And we see in Krishna's pastimes every so often, he will break out this Sudarshan disc and zip, whirl it at somebody and off with their head. This is reserved always for those possessed of a demonic mentality. So the word Sudarshan, Sudarshana, from the root su, meaning good or auspicious, darshan, vision. So one way to think about that is Krishna never misses. He's got perfect aim. The club, or the gada, in Sanskrit, represents the physical world, and Lord Vishnu uses this to bop us on the head in case we get stupid. So we should consider it a special mercy should we get bopped on the head by Krishna. Now here's a way to think about it. You know, we create our own karma, we create our own destiny. And therefore, if we generate a negative karmic reaction, we've essentially bopped ourselves on the head. Once we ask for divine intervention, for divine guidance, then we may still every so often get bopped on the head. But now, rather than just pointlessly bopping ourselves on the head, we are recipients of mercy, really. When we are bopped by Krishna's club, which may happen as a helpful corrective. And someone who is engaged in a life on the path of devotion would tend to see it as such, rather than thinking, oh, why did God do this to me? Or absolving oneself, it's not my fault. Rather, taking responsibility for one's own karma, or if one feels that there is a divine presence in their life, then accepting whatever comes one's way as something instructive, something meant to be helpful, something that, even though it may be difficult or painful even, is something that is meant for us to learn from. So let me know if you have any questions about this verse. Meanwhile, we can move to verse number 47. Arjuna has finished his prayers, and now Krishna speaks. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, happily have I shown you by my internal potency the supreme universal form within the material world. No one before you has ever seen this primal form, unlimited and full of glaring effulgence." So Krishna was happy to show it to Arjuna, not because he would get a chuckle out of freaking Arjuna out, but because Arjuna asked. And therefore Krishna fulfilled his desire. Arjuna wanted to see this form, so Krishna showed it to him. Krishna is not going to show this to just anybody. Arjuna has a special qualification of the very proximity to Krishna that Arjuna is lamenting may have caused him to create offenses. So a little ironic. So the universal form that Arjuna has been seeing has been glaring like thousands of suns. And the innumerable faces of this universal form have constantly been changing. So imagine you're looking at 1,000 faces, giant faces, all of which are constantly changing color, changing expression, changing position, eyes moving. Imagine they're all changing so fast, you can't even keep up with one of them, much less 1,000 of them. Well, that gives you a little bit of an idea of what Arjuna was looking at. Pretty freaky. The phrase nadrishta purvam means no one has previously seen this form. Commentators talk about how this means no one on earth has ever seen this particular form. This particular aspect of Krishna's personality has not been revealed to anyone on earth within this time of the cosmic manifestation. But not necessarily that no one has ever seen it before in any other universe or in any other cycle of cosmic manifestation. A small point, and I suppose that there's reason for the past commentators to be concerned with it, perhaps from a standpoint of logical argumentation or something like that. I think the more important point for us is the phrase, by my internal potency. So Krishna uses this phrase, Atma Yogat. Atma Yogat, like yoga, meaning yoga, union, Atma, self, translates as the divine potency of uniting individual consciousness with ultimate consciousness. Now, you may say, well, that's the goal of yoga. That's what we're trying to do. Well, yeah, that is actually what we're trying to do. Except Krishna can just do that with his own internal potency or his own spiritual energy. He doesn't have to make any effort to do that, which means that he can do that for us. Rather than attempting to attain the unification of our individual consciousness with ultimate consciousness, we can make an appeal to ultimate consciousness, or the person who is ultimate consciousness, to please give us the shelter of his internal energy, which, by the way, is the feminine aspect of divinity. And in so doing, unite us with him. The Hari-kirtana mantra is a request for precisely that benediction. These are vocative forms of the names of Hara, the feminine aspect, and Krishna, the masculine aspect of the one complete absolute truth. So when one chants the Hare-kirtana mantra, what one is doing is asking for the union with ultimate consciousness through the agency of the divine uniting energy, the internal spiritual yogamaya that brings about proximity of individual consciousness to ultimate consciousness. So Krishna has shown this form to his devotee through the medium of his own internal energy. And he continues in verse 48, O best of the Kuru warriors, no one before you has ever seen this universal form of mine, for neither by studying the Vedas, nor by performing sacrifices, nor by charity, nor by pious activities, nor by severe penances can I be seen in this form in the material world. So no endeavor is going to do it. Krishna reveals himself and his various potencies by his own free will. And he gives a list of different pursuits of yoga or Vedic knowledge. So neither by studying the Vedas, in other words, jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge, the yoga of pursuit of the absolute truth through an intellectual insight. That won't do it. Performing sacrifices, in other words, rituals, religious performances, that's not going to do it either. Nor by charity. Material charity is nice. It's good to be generous and helpful to those in need, but that will not result in God revealing himself. Nor by pious activities, other ways of moving through the material world that are according to principles of material religion, let us say. So piety in a Vedic understanding means abiding by the laws of karma, or acting in such a way as to get the universe to be in harmony with you and thus fulfill your material desires. This was described in the 3rd chapter. Nor by severe penances. So intense austerities. You may have seen yogis in India who, and even actually I've heard of some modern yogis in the West who sit on an ice cube, stand in icy cold water, or in the middle of the summer make a ring of fire and stand in the middle of that, or some other kind of intense physical austerity. None of that is going to work because you can't make Krishna do anything. One who is on the path of bhakti, however, develops divine vision by virtue of being given that divine vision. It's not an accomplishment. And they're not particularly interested in seeing the universal form anyway. What they're interested in seeing is the personal form of the Supreme Person, their own beloved Supreme Person. Hence, Arjuna now expresses his interest in seeing the four-armed form, and as we move through to the end of the chapter, Krishna will return to his most familiar and yet most difficult to see two-armed form. So verse 49. You have been perturbed, Krishna is continuing, you have been perturbed and bewildered by seeing this horrible feature of mine. Now, let it be finished. My devotee, be free again from all disturbances. With a peaceful mind, you can now see the form that you desire. So Krishna showed his universal form to Arjuna just to show him that the battle is already a done deal, that the armies that have been assembled, all the members of these armies are already going to die. And in particular, those who were engaged in unlawful actions, the very act of trying to steal the kingdom from Arjuna and his brothers was unlawful. And many other unlawful deeds, dirty deeds, were done in the course of trying to secure the kingdom from the Pandavas. So they're already going to be dispatched with. They're going to be killed as a reaction to their unlawful actions. And as a general rule, those who are devoted to the Supreme Person are not predisposed to engaging in warfare. Arjuna's situation is that this is what he has to go through. This is the thing he can't avoid. And therefore, Krishna has intervened in such a way as to cut off any avenue of spiritual bypassing that Arjuna was inclined to take as a way to avoid engaging on the battlefield. So that brings us to the end of this cluster of verses, where now Krishna is revealing his four-armed form, which is one step closer to the two-armed form we started out with. And this, as we will see, is going to settle Arjuna's mind back into its normal state. So let's take a last call for questions. Here we go. I really enjoyed the symbolism behind the conch, lotus wheel, club, and more. It helps make the different forms recognizable, and also each one is a key reminder to those looking at the painting or the sculpture. Sue, thank you very much for your comment. Yeah, it is really nice to have some sense of what it is one is seeing when one looks at the form of Vishnu, and this actually becomes a meditational aid, allows the mind to focus even more on each detail of the beautiful form, as well as the paraphernalia, the accessories that Vishnu carries. So yeah, thank you very much for your comment. I'm glad you enjoyed that. All right. Any other questions or comments? And while I wait anxiously for anything that you have for me, tonight's class, we looked at the conclusion of Arjuna's prayers, his request to see the four-armed form of Vishnu and some information about that four-armed form. And we spoke specifically about Krishna's internal potency, how proximity of individual consciousness to infinite consciousness comes about by the arrangement of Krishna through the agency of that internal potency. If you have any questions after the fact, if you were watching the recording, please send your questions to me at hari@hari-kirtana.com. I'm always anxious to have an opportunity to hear your questions and hopefully come up with a satisfactory answer. Next week is, hold on. Let me just double check things. Hello, where is my calendar? Next week, I think, is the 4th of July on a Thursday. And so since, yeah. So guess what? Nothing's going to happen next week because it's the 4th of July. We're all going to be watching fireworks or something like that. So not next week, but the following week, which will be July 11th, we will reconvene here with the end of chapter 11. Krishna returns to his two-armed form. Arjuna returns to his state of mental equilibrium, and we will speak about the means to see Krishna as he is. Jill has a question. Why does he request to see the four-armed form instead of the form he is used to? He will see that two-armed form. He requests it, well, we'll discuss that actually next time. It'll be, I guess, I'd be giving away next week's class. He is stepping through stages of intimacy once again. So just as we went from, all right, I'll talk a little bit about it. Just as we went from the very familiar to the awe-inspiring, powerful manifestation of the universal form, to the fear-inspiring, and creating distance in the relationship, now we're going to step back in stages the same way, because the forearmed form of Vishnu is an opulent form, a form also now associated with awe and reverence. This is the majesty of God form of God, whereas Krishna is his friendly cousin form of God. So so just as we went in stages from familiarity to awe and reverence to fear, we're going to step back from fear to awe and reverence to intimacy once again. So just a gradual step-by-step process. Thank you. That's a really good question. And next time we will get deeper into this question. So thank you very much. All right. And I think that's a wrap. Come back here. There we go. So we will say good night to the universal form of Krishna. As Krishna now puts the universal form away, we will also put the universal form away. And I thank you all very, very much for spending your hour with me. It's always a great pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and the rest of your week. I will be sure to send you a reminder email that we will skip a week and resume on July 11th. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. I look forward to seeing you all next time.